Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of the Aspect Reacts here on the Aspect Network. I'm one of your hosts, Sean Hussey, and joining me to discuss the latest and greatest in entertainment is Alex Batts. Alex, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm very excited to be here, be doing the show with you. Excited to dive into the Penguin. We'll get into it.
I know. I'm so excited. So let's kick off this episode by sharing a little bit about ourselves, the show, and the network as a whole. So, The Aspect is a media production company with a focus in pop culture podcasts and social media content. Currently, we have a slate of rotating series here on our podcast feed, our YouTube channel, and our social media, with more to come over the coming weeks.
As for this show, The Aspect Reacts, this is our catch all podcast to discuss the latest and greatest in the world of entertainment, featuring a rotating panel of hosts, both new and familiar to The Aspect. We're starting this podcast by discussing The Penguin, which premiered tonight on HBO and Max. For the next 8 weeks, we're going to be recapping and reviewing the entire season of the series set within the Batman universe. So be sure to keep an eye out for our episodes just hours after the premieres go live, starting Sunday, September 29th.
And we can kick off this week by discussing our overall thoughts on the pilot. So, Alex, you're sort of the resident Batman expert and fan on our show. So, let's start with you. What did you think about the first episode, After Hours?
I loved it, which I mean, big shocker. I'm definitely the mark for this. Showed up wearing my Batman shirt as I had to. Um, yeah, I ironically was not the most hyped for this going in. Not that I wasn't excited, but it's just kind of the like I don't know. I'm like, oh yeah, the Penguin show's coming. Like that's gonna be cool. All the trailers look super solid, but I was like, yeah, I mean that's kind of expected. Like the Batman was just so good, and I have full faith in what the entire creative team behind this has been doing and all everything they've done to as they've been talking about it in the lead up and things like that. And so I'm like, oh yeah, it's gonna be solid, but it wasn't like the weight wasn't ridiculous. Like it wasn't super hard for me to be like, oh, I'm like itching. I need this right now type thing. And so getting to sit down and actually watch it though, I literally I became the meme that everyone posted of the person like leaning forward in the chair and just like locking in like straight for the bit. Like it was so nice to be back in this version of Gotham and like in this Batman universe, and like just immediately got me back in where I was like, oh yeah, like I love Batman stuff so much. And it's cool too because this is able to, and I think that we'll talk about this a lot because I feel like it'll be a big thing throughout the whole season, but it's so impressive how much this is like, yeah, it's in the Batman universe, but like it's not gonna have him in it. They've said he's not gonna be in it, right?
We'll see.
And
We'll see.
there's
I don't know.
there's there's like the little, references and things like that. But at the same time, like it's not a Batman show. Like it's just a crime show and like it's about the penguin, and it really you're not sitting there the whole time. At least I wasn't sitting there being like, "Oh, I wish that Batman was showing up in this." Like, "Oh, I would rather I would rather be spending my
No.
time with him." Like, no, like I was super invested in following Oz and everything that was happening just right from the jump. So yeah, I was super impressed with the premiere. I'm completely locked in now. Not that I wasn't excited for it. Like I was super excited, but it's just one of those things where it was an expected level of quality, and so I was like, "Oh yeah, it's gonna be cool." Um, but yeah, I can't wait to watch this over the next 8 weeks.
Yeah, it was, I think, surprisingly good is a hard thing to say because like there's a level of
Right.
expectation that you have when you know the creatives are so strong, and obviously Matt Reeves sort of shepherding this universe into existence is incredible, and obviously he's handed it off to an incredible team. I want to say I didn't catch her last name. I know it's Lauren. Is it like McDonald? Did you catch it? The showrunner. We will know
Yeah, yeah,
moving forward, and
yeah. I
that
honestly
is
was 100% expecting you to have, like, a full list ready, but it's fine,
yeah,
no,
and that's totally I'm hosting the show, not producing it.
that's true.
It's Lauren
Uh,
LaFranc.
okay. Yeah, that's
So
right, I literally remembered seeing it pop up, like, 5
right,
different times in
and
the
I was like, "I
after
know it's
episode
Lauren."
thing.
So shout out to Lauren and her team, and
Mhm.
obviously, there's a real level of care that's being taken with this universe and development, and, we probably won't spend much of this podcast talking about sort of the DCU side of things just because of the nature of this show, but it's incredible that we're able to see the Reeves verse continue to go and elevate its upon itself.
Mhm.
I had just rewatched the Batman kind of leading up into this, and I hadn't seen it since theaters, and was really just surprised at how good that movie is. And I remember enjoying it in theaters, but then really being floored by it, revisiting it this week ahead of the premiere. And then, to no fault of the show and to the movie, because they're doing an excellent job. And the Batman as a film is pulling so much from Seven, and you're like, okay,
Mhm.
we're just doing Batman, but it's Seven and
7, yeah.
Zodiac. And now we're watching the Penguin, and I'm like, cool, we're just doing the Sopranos and Batman, and like I love it. Like,
Yeah, right.
let's keep bringing out the hits. And
Mhm.
from the jump, you're really sucked back into this world and universe. Obviously, it picks up right after, the end of the Batman film, with Gotham now flooded, dealing with, the repercussions of the Riddler, who, surprisingly is still fairly prevalent in this universe and kind of in this show, which I really
Mhm.
appreciated. And being able to pick up on an area of this universe that, you know, you didn't have to explore, but they acknowledged it in sort of the setup for this show and the press leading up to the premiere, that, I think originally they wanted to sort of make the Penguin story like part of this Batman 2, and then it was
Yeah.
just sort of coming out into its own series where they were like, we have to make more about this character. And we'll talk all about Colin Farrell and just how amazing he is in this role. And as you sort of alluded to, I don't think anybody was specifically asking for the Penguin show, but that
Yeah,
that
but
is
it's
that's okay. Like that, I'm glad we have it now. Like now we're
same.
here and it's great. So nobody asked for a lot of things that we got that are great content. So I just, continue to be impressed by the level of craft and care that's put into this, from, the way that they're able to help recreate Gotham and keep a similar tone. Obviously, it's really hard to
It's so
be up to snuff with some of these other creatives, but
so
like,
honestly, we could go ahead and talk about it because I'm so impressed with visually how close this still looks to the language of the Batman.
sure.
Like, and it's hard to say this without it sounding like a detraction from the show, but it's just so hard to be at the level that the Batman is operating at, especially like if on a TV show and with that budget and just the different things. But like it does 100% maintain like the feeling that you get from that film, and like it feels like the same world. It looks like the same world for the most part. It definitely like they did an excellent job there. Um, and so I was very impressed with that.
Yeah, and I think, obviously, we talk a lot about TV budget versus film budget, and this obviously is doing a really great job of capitalizing on that budget and executing in key areas where it certainly feels a little bit more like TV than a feature film, but it's going to, with just the range of budget and how these productions work. And
Hmm.
as you said, they're doing a really incredible job matching the energy and look and feel, particularly from just probably using some of the same sets and set designers to, I think the cinematography, for the large part, certainly is up to par, at least really doing a great job of working within the world that Greg Fraser created. And then, of course, having Mick Giacchino come in, the son of Michael, and
Oh,
doing
dude,
the
the music is
score is
so
so
good.
good.
The
And so
cues are
glad to see
perfect. They're
that
all just,
apple
like,
did not fall
so
far from the tree. Like,
yeah, it lines up so perfectly from all the, like, motifs that are already established and then, like, growing into some new ones. And even the same thing with the cinematography, like, it does in specific like, especially when we're at the Iceberg Lounge, right? Like, that looks pretty one to one with how it
yeah,
is. And but then you also still are able to introduce new visual language when we move outside of the more like dense city of Gotham and like into suburbs or
yeah.
like into a mansion area like the super elite. And so getting these different shades of Gotham as a whole and really like making it a more this was already my favorite version of Gotham on screen, I think. And then this just like fleshes that out and even to being a more of a genuine place. Like you're like, oh yeah, okay, this is how a giant city like this does end up like spreading out once you go farther and farther out. And just to see that new element of it too added in is I think very nice and like really beneficial to the show and helps it stand on its own some, which is good.
Yeah, and the news section at the beginning of the episode, and we'll break it all down in our next segment, but walking us through the different areas of Gotham that we didn't see in the first film, of like the suburbs and sort of the richer areas, and then obviously
Hmm.
going out to sort of see like Gotham's equivalent of like Long Island, where like his mother lives, and being able to
Right.
like go to places like that, and really shape out a Gotham that obviously takes a lot of inspiration from Chicago, as well as New York, of course. And, really just adds all this breadth of like, I don't know if Batman's out, in the suburbs fighting crime, but at the same time, we got it covered. And, you
Yeah.
know, I was sort of joking with my roommate when we were watching of like, oh, we're going to visit Aunt May now, now that we're
Right,
out
yeah,
to
that's
Shelly's
yeah.
house.
It's
Um,
hard not to, like, just immediately have those kinds of thoughts and, like, that make those associations, but I think that that helps it on the whole because it just makes it, again, more like a real place. That it makes it believable for the characters to be living there, and, like, the city does and the city and the characters' lives do extend beyond the normal borders that we see, which I think helps it, and yeah, to one of your points earlier about the universe stuff, I think that this does a really good job of building and rooting it in, like, the universe, like, with the references to the Riddler or even the Batman at the beginning with the newscast stuff, and, like, Penguin's continued reaction and commentary to some of the major events that happen in the film. Like, it's these subtle things, and I think it helps that it's in such close proximity to the movie time-wise that and that movie has, like, the events of that have an immediate impact here, but it's just a good way for them to, like, build the universe without being a super overt, like, "Hey, this is direct sequel to," like, and I know that they still are billing it like they're like, "It's the next chapter of the Batman crime saga." So, like, that is, like, what it is technically, but it doesn't feel as much of a, I don't know exactly how to phrase it, like, it's just a more well executed, I think, way to do that and to expand your universe without being super super like in your face about it, I guess. Like, it just feels genuine, which is good.
Yeah, it's a really strong branch of this universe rather than trying to like shoehorn its way in for the sake of capitalizing on a really strong IP, which I think
Yeah.
we've seen other franchises do as of late, unfortunately, and deal with the repercussions of that both like critically and on the fandom side. And to see that there is something that they're really trying to craft and with a lot of care and energy and a lot of strong talent behind, I think goes to show that not only does DC and Warner Brothers have a lot of faith in what Matt Reeves is building, but also that they're willing to give them the time and energy to execute correctly on things like this. And it's really refreshing to be able to see that in an era where streaming and television can sometimes sort of just pump out content for the sake of content. And again, even the things we take in jest of looking like Aunt May's house or whatever, it's all in jest and in spirit of what we certainly appreciate about the show and its ability to expand that world and universe.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, like, it's doing it in such great ways, and I mean, I just geeked out about, like, the Rex Calabrese story, like, being able to throw something like that in there, such a deep lore cut, and you're able to do that, and it's this thing that's just integrated really solidly in there and just makes a great character moment, but you're like, oh, that's a super deep thing, and then Sophia's all that stuff is fantastic. But I think we'll talk more about specific things in our next section, so we'll take a quick break, but whenever we return, we're going to discuss some of our favorite moments from the episode. We'll be right back.
Hey, Aspect listener, I'm Kate.
And I'm Alex, enjoying this show here on the Aspect Network.
Then check out Bending the Narrative.
We're your one-stop shop for all things Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Each week, we break down an episode from the series and discuss our favorite moments, with a particular focus on the characters and narrative threads that tie the series together.
In addition to discussing the original series, we're also tackling things from The Legend of Korra to the novels and the comics as well.
Now join us as we travel into the world of Team Avatar and discuss one of the greatest animated series of all time on Bending the Narrative here on the Aspect Network.
Now, back to the show. Welcome back to the show. So, before the break, we discussed our overall thoughts on the episode 1 of The Penguin, After Hours. Now, we want to dive into some of our favorite moments from the show. Sean, what were some of your highlights from this episode?
Yeah, I mean, where to start, right? I mean, I'm just gonna kind of walk through it, I think, to kick off. I mean, from the jump, it does a great job of reacquainting us to the universe, as we talked about in the last segment, by going into the iceberg and then to the club underneath. I forget what it's called. I think it's 40 something. I just watched the movie last
44
night.
Below.
Yeah, there you go. Batman
Mhm.
guy, right
It
here.
was
Thank you so much.
upstairs, I think, but yeah.
Okay, sick. And so that it's incredible how well, by the way, this is a side tangent, but like how well that visual motif of like the
Oh, the
entrance to
doors.
his of the door, like
Oh, I thought that
just like
too.
the
Whenever it
circle
opened, I was
behind
like,
him, like,
this is just such good design on so many levels. Like,
and
it's so
it
great.
feels like, and I don't want to not give credit where credit's due, but it does feel a little bit like they were like, this is cool, and then it really took off, and people were like, this is really cool, and they were like, well, let's keep using this,
Yeah,
because I
right.
feel like eventually we're gonna have like every major Batman character like come through that door, just like get that visual
Get that
behind them.
shot.
It's
Yeah.
so good. And so, being able to again reacquaint us and, you know, I think that the scene with Alberto had kind of been pretty frequently marketed, is particularly obviously the shot of like the penguin lighting him up.
Dude, I
Um,
honestly I'd completely forgotten about it while I was watching the scene.
that's really
100%.
good.
And, like, right after it happened, I was like, "Oh, yeah, there is that shot of him just absolutely unloading while he's, with the same camera shot." Like, yeah, of course.
And even, even forgetting that that was in the marketing, which you try to do when you watch these types of things, I mean, you just feel the like incoming dread of like you're like something bad's about to happen. Like this is
Yeah.
not. And I really love how they talked about it in the like after credit scene of just like the behind the scenes stuff of it's
Mhm.
sort of the Alberto's laughing at Oz that like is a
Mhm.
real trigger for him, and like we'll talk as we go through these favorite moments, like the characterization that they've brought to Oz Cobb, not Oz Cobblepot and the Penguin,
Mhm.
um, is really fascinating. Like he is this mama's boy, and he, obviously just like wants to be liked so bad and respected
So
so bad.
desperately. Yeah, so desperately.
And in ways that like, as we're talking through favorite moments and just the execution of the show, like as he's driving along with Victor for the first time and they're like he's like, talking about the air
Air
freshener and the
freshener, he's like,
music
"You like this?"
plays.
You're like, "Oh,
I
it's
like
so
I
good."
looked over and I was like, what is happening? What are we
It's so
watching
it's
right
because he's a
now?
person, like, it's just,
Right.
like, oh, yeah, it's so good. I love yeah, his characterization is incredible here. He's just so relentlessly fascinating in this. Like, it's one of the main reasons I think that the show succeeds so well and immediately being able to pull you back into it is just how well one he's written, and then also Colin's performance is unreal. Like,
Oh,
and the makeup and costume and prosthetics team deserve all the flowers. Also, I can't see Colin in there, dude. Like, I
oh,
literally, while I was watching the scene, I was trying to be like, that's Colin Farrell, and like I can't see him. um but yeah, like his performance is incredible, and the way that yeah, like the complexity that they're bringing there is just so like you get so engrossed immediately because yeah, he has all the layers to him, and you really can feel him kind of like going through the way he's able to immediately compose himself and like flip the situation when like Alberto shows up, and like how he transitions in there. And you're like, oh, okay, I see. Like you get such an immediate read on the character through every interaction that he has. But the thing about that is that like it's a consistently changing read to some extent. And so like that just keeps you super invested in him. And then yeah, then also you just get the little moments of like you're saying, like in the car talking about the air freshener or like the music or whatever, or like the Slurpees or the slushies, which like they go back to. And it's just like the things like that that make him a real genuine person. Um yeah, it's incredible stuff.
yeah, and just continuing to build upon what was already a really strong characterization in the Batman. And honestly, like I don't know at what level the Penguin ranks for you on like Batman villains and kind of
Not,
your
like,
history.
high up. It's
Yeah.
so hard. 'Cause he also just there's too many good Batman
Right. Well,
villains,
that
but,
was the
like
other argument is like I know you have your loves for a lot of the other characters, and so
yeah.
it's been really interesting what, they've been doing with the character generally as of late. Obviously, you've got Colin Farrell's performance, and then they have, what they've done with him in Caped Crusader, which I guess is making the Penguin a woman. And I didn't get to finish all of season 1, but from what I saw, like that was a really interesting characterization as well. Like
Mhm.
it's cool, somewhere there's somebody who's like, the Penguin is my favorite character ever, and like
Dude,
they're
yeah,
having a
right?
field day right now.
Yeah,
Like they're
right.
having a
Or
field
they're
day.
super mad because it's Oz Cobb and not Oswald Cobblepot,
I mean, maybe, but
but, you know.
hopefully not. And so again, Colin Farrell is just incredible, like you said, and it really just completely hides within that character in a way that really, should be celebrated with other just incredible like prosthetic performances in the history of like film and television, because they're just continually hitting it out of the park. And something that I don't know if was just not seen in the marketing or something that we just weren't really paying attention to, but like really surprised how much they're leaning on his disability and like limp
Mm,
and
hmm
his foot, which like was another crazy prosthetic. Like shout out
Oh,
to the
dude,
shout out
yeah,
to the
that.
special effects and hair and makeup team. Like incredible.
Hmm.
Um and being able to execute on that. But like, they talk about it again in the behind the scenes of like, Oz's sort of sympathy towards Victor, who clearly
Victor,
has a bit of a
because
stutter, and
yeah.
their shared disability. And like, I was even watching it again last night, in preparation for this. Like, I think he limps in the Batman, but like, it's certainly
Yeah, he
not
does.
something that like is highlighted upon at this level. And like from the
Hmm.
beginning all the way through this episode, like you just see it. I think it's accentuated, 10 times more, and being able to look at the character that way. I mean, he does waddle, which I think is
Hmm.
intentional and like obviously playing
I
into
mean,
the
yeah, that,
character.
like you got him waddling, and then the umbrella shot, and like the first couple opening shots too. I'm like, oh, of course, like they did that, which is cool.
I
Like
need
cool to
some
see.
robot penguin bombs. I just need like little penguins running around.
uh,
Um,
no,
but yeah,
I
I
do
mean, yeah,
agree. It's not as like highlighted in like he just does in the like have the limp in the Batman. It's not something they really like focus on, but it's the type of thing that you get more of a focus on whenever you are able to devote now like 8 hours to a character and like really diving into that story, which again another huge plus for this show. It understands an hour long like episode if we're gonna
yeah,
do
we're
the premium.
moving too. Like we are moving.
Yeah, like it's I like that it takes up the full hour, and we know all the episodes this season are like I think the shortest one is 56 minutes, I'm pretty sure, which is
Yeah,
great. So and it uses all of that too. I just was continuously impressed how much like the first half of the episode especially, but I mean the entire episode really just stays so close with him timeline wise from like one event to the next. You're not like skipping a lot, and I think that especially with the events that take place, that just helps you stay super engaged with the story. Like the opening with the conversation with Alberto, and then like moving from that and Victor and all of that, and like seeing Oz figure out the next steps, and then going through that um, was just a great pace for the show to like have as it's moving through the first episode and get you like into that world. And then I mean, yeah, Sophia also absolutely
yeah, we'll
incredible.
get there. She's
But yeah,
killing it.
it's all good. It's
Um,
it's so good.
Yeah, I mean, I before we get to Sophia, who obviously, Kristen Milioti is
Christina, no, Kristen. Yeah, you're.
Kristen.
I think. Yeah, sorry,
I
adding
know,
an extra eye. I know.
yeah.
Yeah.
Kristen Milioti. What she does is obviously going to be. We're going to talk about it a lot because it's incredible. We're going to talk about her all season, I'm sure. I wanted to make sure that we had some time to really highlight Victor as well, and I believe
Hmm.
it's Renzi Felice, is how you pronounce his name. But like, is this a character like this is where I rely on you? Like, is
Not
this
that
a
I
character
know of.
from the comics? Like, this is sort of an original creation of the
Yeah,
show.
I think this is just an original creation. I also do.
He
I
will be
really like.
Robin by the end of the show. He will be Robin. This is our Robin.
No, I like. It's a super interesting perspective, I think, or take on the henchman like archetype that you deal with, because and especially looking at it in the context of all the Batman villains, because like that's kind of a funny thing that I think gets poked fun of in the animation, various animations that we've gotten, but in the comics too, where like it's like where do these like you've got Joker goons and Two Face goons and Riddler goons and Penguin goons, where's the goon henchman farm that they're getting them from, and like how do people sign up for this and like that kind of thing. I like the joke in episode where he's like, "What, you think I just like hire whoever off the street?" I was like, "Oh, that's funny,"
Yeah.
but I do think it is like an interesting practical take on that stereotype of a character of like seeing how someone does get wrapped into this, and of course then it's putting it through the lens of this world that's been created with the Batman and the like Reeves verse and all of that stuff, and it being more grounded. I hate by the way that that is like the buzzword now. I don't like the because I'm like I understand it because it does like succinctly kind of it gets the point across, but I don't know. That's a side tangent. But I do think that Victor is a really interesting way to explore a henchman starting out and like how you can see that and how someone does get involved in that, and then also directly seeing that explored through the Penguin and how that kind of relationship is going to develop. Like you said, obviously, like it could have been super easy for Penguin to just dispose of him, but then he's got the kind of not companionship right off the bat, but the sympathy for him. Um, and so keeping him around. So yeah, I think that that's a really interesting dynamic that is going to be cool to see like play out as the season goes on, and just another like incredible performance too. Like the whole cast is just fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, he's playing, and I'm looking into it because I can't remember the guy's name, but it's playing so much on, what is a very popular trend in film and TV now, of kind of like the lone wolf and the cub, and
Hmm.
playing on this mentor mentee relationship that I think is really prevalent in a lot of television and just a lot of media generally in narrative. And it reminds me a lot of, who I was trying to find was the kid from the beginning of the Batman, who then people were like, now that's gonna be Robin.
Yeah.
The half mast. Yeah,
Yeah.
Jay Lykugar Koro. Sorry, buddy. But then he went on and
Names are hard.
played Tim Drake, right? In Titans. Um
Oh, okay. You're talking about. I thought you were talking about the mayor's kid. No, yeah, you're
Oh,
talking.
no,
Yeah,
sorry, I'm talking
you're
about
talking
the
about the
half-masked,
gang
like,
member.
the
Yeah,
gang member
yeah.
kid.
Yeah. He did
Sorry, Jay.
play. He did play Tim Drake in Titans. Yeah,
Good for him, that was cool.
yeah.
But
Just
just,
haven't seen the last
on
one.
this idea of, like, seeing these, young impressionable kids in the streets of Gotham and, like, how they're being affected by either, somebody like the Batman or somebody like the Penguin, and seeing how Oz is sort of taking somebody under his wing. And it'll be really interesting to see. Obviously, he really proved his loyalty this episode, Victor, through what was a really awesome sequence at the end there. But I do have this feeling, and we'll talk about it in some speculation a little bit later, but like, I don't know if I trust this guy fully yet. Like, I feel like he's going to screw up somewhere along the lines, and his
Oh,
allegiances
you
are going
don't
to be
trust him
tested.
as far as like competence or like.
He feels like an impressionable kid, and Sophia, as we're about to get into,
Okay.
seems very persuasive. And so, I don't know. I worry about this kid and his relationship with Oz. Obviously, I don't think he's like, I don't know, trying to be sneaking around Oz's back yet, or like is some secret double agent. But
Hmm.
his character archetype certainly seems like somebody who's really struggling to do the right thing. And those types of characters can very easily get wrapped up in the wrong idea, and it would be a traditional narrative rope to sort of have him and Oz's relationship be really tested along the process. Sort of uh, the bad before the ending. So we'll see how that unfolds. But really great job, and overall kind of transitioning then over to Sophia Falcone, and her introduction here is just. I mean, I'll let you sort of lead off with this one. I don't know. I mean, she's obviously a character from the comics, but
Hmm.
I don't know how prevalent she is outside of a few stories.
Yeah, so Sophia, she's not, ironically, the most prevalent in a lot of things, but she is extremely pivotal in Dark Victory, which is the sequel to The Long Halloween, which they also directly reference here. They do, so I'm going to spoil Dark Victory for you.
It's okay. I live.
Fair.
Spoiler to our audience, I guess.
Yeah, for I don't remember when it first came out. But anyways, so in Dark Victory, she is like eventually revealed as the killer, and like is a serial killer in that who's called the Hanged Man, right? And so like they directly reference that here, which I definitely geeked out on and was super cool to see. Um, but it's yes, like that's a big role for her there, and that's like the main thing that she's like known for. Um, and it's just awesome to see Sophia Falcone in such a big role. I always think it's cool whenever in media we get to see like the Falcone family and the Maronis, which we'll also talk about Sal a
Yeah.
little bit later. But like they're just cool to see. I think that's a really great area of Batman stuff that doesn't always get the spotlight and kind of gets overshadowed by like the dudes in costumes, like or people with superpowers running around. Like you don't really always focus on the gang bosses and all that stuff. But it's great whenever they do get play. Seeing Sophia in this level of role was awesome. And then yeah, like immediately by having that reference and like establishing her as being like post staying in Arkham, which also is not what happens typically. Like that's a cool new thing as far as I'm aware. Um, and like that just immediately like you get so much built into her character by just those like couple of lines. And then of course she like expands upon that and plays into that in multiple ways as the episode plays out. But like it's just a way of immediately getting so much character information and depth in there just like instantly. And like even if you're someone who's not familiar with the history of like that comic and things like that, you still are able to understand, like, I mean, she says it like the serial killer and spend time in Arkham, and like you know enough about Arkham, you're gonna tangentially be like, oh, this is a pretty big deal. And so like it does that even if you have none of that knowledge. And so I think that's great. And then yeah, just the performance is just
Oh
ridiculous.
yeah,
Like she's
she's
a
crazy.
powerhouse.
I mean, I know she's obviously been in quite a few things.
She's the
Um,
mother. This is How I Met Your
well,
Mother.
right, yeah, but that is, of course, like what people I think most notably know her from, and
Yeah.
it's great to see her sort of get her flowers in in what is a really exciting role. And I don't know what the extent of that will be beyond this series. I hope, already based on what we've seen, that there will be more. And it seems like from the sort of season ahead snippet that we're going to be exploring obviously some of her history, but also
Hmm.
potentially a lot of the character's history during the flooding of Gotham, which is really intriguing because like that is
Yeah.
a really small period of time, but like obviously a very pivotal one. And I wonder how it's going to, I don't know, shape the story that is being told here. But obviously, she's been incredible. And I can't wait to see more of what she's up to.
Yeah, same. Just fantastic stuff. I'm really the what looks like the amount of time that we're going to be spending in the past is something that was definitely very intriguing to me with like the footage that we saw, yeah, from the like in the weeks ahead little
Yeah.
trailer thing that they played.
So, somebody else that I want to shout out just because, like, great character actor, one of my favorites, Michael Kelly is in this as Johnny Vitti. Sort of he's the guy at the head of the table. Um,
Oh, yeah,
you know,
okay.
he's been
Yeah,
in a
yeah.
bunch of stuff. And
Yeah, he's
so
great.
I'm interested to see, what he was in Man of Steel too, wasn't he?
Mhm, yeah.
Yeah. Um, so, just incredible stuff from him, and
He's
he's a great
he's
character actor.
trying
What
to
was that?
ask Lois out throughout the movie.
Oh, yeah.
He's the Daily Planet,
Um,
like the other Daily Planet.
um, and so, just interesting to see too, like, from what I understand and what I remember, like, he is sort of the central point of the folder that Penguin sort of collects in the first scene is
Yes.
like,
Yeah.
so I, was expecting him to be, I don't know, like a politician or
Well,
somebody that was like under Falcone's thumb. And obviously Penguin sends his sort of goon out to go like deliver the message about it, but that doesn't seem to be of something that's really been addressed yet. And I wonder where that's going to go this season.
yeah, I don't think that he was the only focus of the folder. I think that he was just one of
Yeah.
them. But yeah, I did love that scene also, like the scene of Penguin like going into work and him dealing with all of the whole operation and all of that stuff. I was like, oh, this is just such good classic crime drama stuff and just executed. So I was like, oh, there's more of this. I also haven't seen The Sopranos, and so I'm like, this has just been described as like The Sopranos but Batman, and I'm like, this is great. I should
Like
watch
maybe I
this.
should get some friends.
As if I need like obviously I know I should watch The Sopranos, but yeah, I'm like, oh, this is the good stuff.
It's great. We have so many excellent actors coming up, later on this season too. Like Theo Rossi's going to come in from Luke Cage, and he was really strong in that. And seeing, as you said, the Penguin kind of in a day-to-day life is really interesting, and the drops operation is such a small but intriguing like world building element from the Batman that I like that they're building upon. Of like, from what I
I,
know, like that's not necessarily like something from the comics. It was just like a
it's
drug that
literally
they
just
came up.
Yeah, it's literally just a drug that they came up with because they like couldn't do cocaine in the movie because it was like there's 100 like they just didn't want to do an actual real like harder drug because it was a PG-13 movie, and so they were like, oh, it's drops. And so
Yeah, sick. Love the
which
concept of
is so
drops.
smart, honestly.
It's
Also, though,
excellent. Yeah.
love that this is just hard like TV MA,
Oh, totally. I
which is
mean,
great.
naked Colin Farrell in the penguin suit was not something that I was like entirely ready for, but you know what? It's cool. That's what we get with our MA rating, and I'm totally fine with it. And so, continuing to kind of walk through the episode, obviously, we still have Maroni to talk about. Something I wanted to ask you a little bit about in relation to the world building of the Batman, and something that I don't think have talked about much kind of off air, but obviously, one of the bigger sort of twists or changes, at least I think it's a change that the Batman makes, is that, one, there's the element of Catwoman being Falcone's daughter.
That's
Um,
a
is
normal
that a
thing.
comment? Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
it depends on the story, but that is a thing that has been established.
Cool. And then obviously we'll talk about the other one a little bit after, but just Martha Wayne end up being Martha
Oh,
Arkham is like a other element of it. And
yeah.
so starting with Catwoman, like obviously she doesn't have aspirations to like run a crime empire, but like do you feel, or just sort of like speculating and sort of your own personal preference, like is this something where you would like to have seen her involved based on the lore that's established? Do you think that, the other Falcons know that like she's their half sister? Like, is there something here that you think is intriguing, or is this just going to be a plot thread that is, do you think that is sort of dropped as we push through because it's more about Batman and Catwoman?
Yeah, I think it was more of a, emotional and character plot thread for her in that movie than something that will be explored upon going further. I also am not a big fan. So it's a thing that they do a lot in the comics, and not necessarily because of the Falcone lineage stuff, but just in general because she's a Batman rogue at times. Well, they'll do the whole like Selena running a criminal empire organization, and there'll be like whatever gang war between her and Penguin and whatever other crime bosses you want to throw in there. And like there was literally an event last year, might have been this year, there was like another Gotham War thing that's between like Batman and
They do
Catwoman
that
and
a
like the
lot.
gang. Yeah, like it's a thing that happens a lot in the
Yeah.
comics, and I hate it every time. I don't think it fits for her character, honestly. Like I think you nailed it. Like she doesn't have aspirations to run a criminal empire. That's not her thing, I don't think. And so it just feels really weird to me whenever they do that. And it happens a lot. I just check out instantly every time. Like it's not the most interesting. I'm sure there are some people who like that's their favorite version of Catwoman, which is super interesting to me.
Yeah.
Uh,
Got to
but
get
I'm
them
not
on
one
the
of them.
podcast.
But yeah, so I like because of that, I don't really want to see it. But also, I don't think that it will be a thing that really like comes back and that they kind of do. I don't think that that's necessarily where her character was leaning in at the end of the Batman either,
Right.
or that it's something that like I think they have enough of the other pretty big pieces and the like crime family and gang war stuff set up with this that they don't really need to pull. I think that if they pull her in, it's more of a like as a lone person on a side or the other being used for whatever random thing as opposed to like I have Catwoman goons
Yeah.
type beat.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see. Obviously, this isn't, it's Batman adjacent. We'll probably talk about the repercussions of the Batman at some point here. But I wouldn't be surprised as they've started writing the Batman, 2. And I don't know who's been confirmed outside of Pattinson and Circus, and obviously, Gordon and, why can't I remember his name? Jeffrey Wright. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Brain. But like there's a version of this in which, she doesn't even come back for the sequel because like she's left Gotham, and like, she's just
Yeah.
out of the picture for a while, and like that's a thing. Anyway, not to digress into Batman and Catwoman talk, but it'll be interesting to see. And then the other part of that is then sort of the Martha Arkham, Martha Wayne connection of that was a really big sort of plot point of the first Batman film, was this sort of bridging of the Waynes and the Arkhams to, sort of hatch Riddler's plan, and him being sort of an orphan underneath their system, and, playing with a lot of these ideas of the sins of the father and such. Do you think that that's something that could possibly continue to be explored? Obviously we're going to go back to Arkham with Sophia. Like, is that something that you feel will continue to remain prevalent? Or again, is this just one of those interesting world building plot points that, we may not see again?
I think that it'll be I think it might lean more towards the latter just because the more like in-depth Arkham lore stuff that does exist tends to start airing more towards the like supernatural kind of side of things. Because whenever you start getting into the actual like further up or back, however you want to
Yeah.
think about it, in the Arkham time like lineage, um, with Arkham being haunted and like the spirits of Amadeus Arkham and different things like that, and all of that kind of thing, it feels less. That's not as much the direction as it's sounding like Matt Reeves has, been pretty emphatic about like the things they are going to tackle or how they're going to tackle them in the way they're telling these stories. And that's not to say that they couldn't, but it does feel, I think, more like the kind of just adding weight to it and like making these connections that are notable things for the audience, regardless of your level of engagement with the media. Like as I was saying earlier, pretty much everyone is like at least vaguely familiar with what Arkham Asylum is, and so
Right.
like it's a pretty big, it adds a lot of weight to it whenever you can instantly be like, oh, she was in Arkham. You're like, oh, okay, like that's super interesting. Like
She's
that means,
crazy.
yeah, like that means this and that. Like, and
Yeah.
so it's like, yeah, it just automatically like bakes in a lot of stuff to the character, I think, to do that. And it's one of those things where you can do that without really having any negative ripple effects the other way. Because sometimes whenever there are things like that, you can like, oh, we can make this connection here and here. But by doing that, it's kind of either changing something drastically or like breaking whatever bridge might have been there before in an instance. And so like you're able to do that here because the other side of it is like, well, there's not like there is some more exploration of the like Arkham line and things like that, but like not a ton. And so like
Right.
it doesn't really make that many waves. It's more of a, you're getting a lot more out of it than you're potentially giving up on the other end. So I think that's more of what that is in that scenario. Um, I also hope that's this. I know you didn't ask about this, but I hope it's a similar situation with the whole Hush thing. If
Oh
rumors are
yeah.
to be believed, that's not the case, and he is wanting Hush to be the villain, which like I got issues with that, but that's fine. We're not talking about that here.
Yeah. We got plenty of time to talk about that for sure. Well, continuing to push through the episode, of course, I think that sort of the next key point that's worth discussing is the aforementioned Salvatore Maroni and
Mhm.
the incredible performance by Clancy Brown. I mean, he's so good in everything.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. I was like, he's doing extra work in this one. He's like really good here. He last I saw him was Gen V, which I thought he was pretty
Hmm.
good in. Obviously, he did a small role in like Ahsoka, and he's done a lot of voiceover work
What
as of
the
late.
fuck? What was he in Ahsoka?
He reprised his role from Rebels as like the mayor of Lothal.
Oh,
He had that like
right.
brief cameo at the beginning, and then he was in the Mandalorian and whatever too as that other character. But Clancy Brown is always great, and again, really appreciated that performance. Obviously, Maroni is such a crucial character to the Batman world and the crime families, and like ironically, I knew the casting had happened, but it's very similar to you in the opening. I like kind of forgot that this was happening, and part of me, even though I just watched the damn movie last night, was like, isn't he dead? And then I was like, oh my god, no, he's not dead. He's
He's
just like
just in
caught
prison.
in prison.
Yeah.
And so incredible work there. I love that Oz is trying to play both sides. It's gonna cost him so bad because he's
Oh,
making terrible
100%.
mistakes. And
There's
it's
no
so
way.
yeah, it's so fun to be able to watch a flawed character who really just wants to be liked and accepted and wants power and is willing to do anything to do it, and is going about these snake-like ways to do it. And again, just finding the easiest path or the most convoluted path
Dude,
to
it's so
victory.
great. But like
And
in hindsight, I was like, oh, this was so smart though, actually. Like as he was like dropping off the ring and stuff, I'm like, why are you I mean, sure, man, but then like you get to the end, I'm like, oh, you're all right, you're playing chess. I get it. Like
yeah,
it's
I
definitely
mean,
not gonna
that's a
work.
good question, right? Like, again, I had a few other things I was trying to do to take notes and get ready for this podcast, amongst other things as I was watching.
Patriots game going
No,
on.
no, 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 nothing like that. I feel like, and we could talk about it, like, I do feel like he was walking in with the plan of like, I want to team up with Maroni, and then gave him the ring to kind of prove his worth. And then when that didn't really seem to go, he was like, okay, I'm going to turn the plan on its head and use Victor to kind of do what we end up seeing at the end of the episode. Or like, was the plan always
I think the
to
plan
like,
was always because in the scene where they're at his mother's house and they're watching whatever,
right?
movie, and he's like, "Oh, it doesn't like." He's like, "Who is?" I forget the name. He's like, "Oh, it doesn't matter. Like, it's just a fall guy. Like, you just pin it on them." Like, I think that's when he gets the idea to be like, "Okay, I can do this, this, and then
Sure.
that," and like that'll end up working. And so I do think that that was the plan going in. Um, but yeah,
I mean, super
as
well
far as
executed plan.
yeah,
Super cool. Yeah, I mean, so walking through that, like, what were your thoughts kind of on Maroney? Obviously, he's going to come back. Do you think that he's going to find his way out of prison by the end of this? Obviously, a lot of his informants and sort of people inside the Falcone operation that worked to put him in were now sort of caught by the end of the Batman. Obviously, they're dealing with the flood as well, but like, is there a version of events, and it seems like it would, where if there's a revelation to the public that there was sort of this corrupt operation to put Maroney in jail, that like he may be exonerated and released, right, somewhere down the line in this season.
do we think that okay, so one, I think that he ends up out of Blackgate one way or another
Sure.
for sure. How that happens, I'm not sure. It would be super interesting if Dent is the one who exonerates him. Not that we're getting Dent in this. Like, so I
Right.
feel like we would
I'm
have.
also always, again, not going to talk about it too much, but like, I got to say, sometimes having multiple stories in the Batman universe is hard, because for a second I was like, aren't we getting Dent? And then I remembered that's Joker 2, not this. Harvey
They
Dent
have.
is going to be in Joker 2 also, but it's a different guy, and like that's
Mhm.
not as important. But they have not cast Dent in this, but they have
No.
alluded to him, right? In
Yeah,
like the
there's been like
newspapers and some
newspaper.
other stuff.
Yeah, there's been newspaper stuff that's been talking about. And
John David Washington.
dude, I'm saying, bro, I need. It's the perfect fan cast for like. Please,
Pretty
I've never.
cool.
Oh, it's so
It'd
good.
be pretty
I
cool.
need it. I need.
But no, that's a great point. Like, I don't know if they would. I don't know if they would do this of like dropping Dent for the first time in this show. But I really like your line of thinking that, like, I don't know, could he be a name drop of like Maroney gets out and they're like, oh, it's this new kid on the block, like Harvey Dent, like,
Mhm.
and people are like, oh my god, it's
It
Harvey
does feel
Dent, and
kind
then
of
like we don't
like.
actually see him.
God, it seems so counterintuitive though to be like, yeah, like because he's the typical, like tough on crime, gonna clean up the streets. Let me get out the biggest, like
Sure.
the previous. I mean, I know it's because technically it would in this scenario be like because they falsified everything, and so like it's not a rightful trial, and he's like
Yeah.
sticking up for the justice system, being like legitimate and all of that stuff. So like you could spin it that way, but then it's like. Yeah, but also you're putting Maroney back on the street, which is not the best thing. And so it's that kind of like, I don't know if they would go that direction, but it could be interesting. Um, I mean, we'll get Dent eventually. Whether or not it's in the show, they are teasing him, and he'll show up. So that's going to be something.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's going to be great. I mean, Matt Reeves and his team are kicking all sorts of ass. So, kind of to help wrap up this section of the show and kind of talking about some of our favorite moments, like let's walk through the ending here a little bit, from obviously the chase in the purple Maserati, which is such a incredible like callback throughout the episode of just like, it's a really easy car to spot and it's really hard to lose somebody in a purple Maserati, to
Yeah.
obviously like the Penguin's little encounter outside that street market, and then that
Mhm.
goon getting hit by the bus, which was crazy, and like
So
what a
that
random
whole like
moment.
5 minutes was so good, honestly.
Like what an insane sort of sequence of events. And then of course, obviously that really, really incredible sort of conversation and confrontation between Sophia and Penguin as he's like about to get his arm fucking ripped off.
Yeah,
Excuse my
dude.
French.
Gnarly. It was
you know,
gnarly.
yeah, I mean, and just what an incredible performance again from Krista Milioti, and you know, just setting up what is now, as you sort of talked about, the car and the crash and Alberto's body, and now setting up this Maroney versus Falcone family feud. Like, I mean, we're in for it now, right? I mean, it's just
Yeah.
awesome.
Oh, it's so good. That entire sequence is fantastic. You again get to see so much of Penguin's character when she's like, "Oh, well, this kid says that he saw again the payoff of the car thing, being like it's impossible to not notice this." Granted, that kid was trying to steal the rims off of it, anyways. So that's, but like that exchange where she's like, "Oh, he's the liar," and he's like, "Yeah, of course," and she just kills him, and she's like, "You will do literally anything to like get yourself out of it, even at the cost of someone else's life." And seeing that repeatedly through the episode, like you get that. And then yeah, just the way the entire sequence plays out is fantastic. Just incredible tension, top tier performances from both of them, and just like the payoff is so satisfying too. Like her going out there finding Alberto, just the absolute shriek and like Penguin's laughter at it, like it's just all pulled off so perfectly. And really, yeah, we're getting this, and all of the pieces just really falling into place and everything like really making sense, and the stage being fully set for, yeah, just unbridled chaos, I feel like is what we're going to get here. And just like continuing to see the Penguin being the absolute worst person and still somehow finding ways to make us be like, yeah, like I want to see you get out of this and pull off this horrible thing that you're trying to do. Like being able to root for that like wholeheartedly is such a wild thing to pull off. And it's just super entertaining the whole way through as well. So yeah, and I love too how well the show does like those little payoffs of like so many things being set up or mentioned early in the episode, and like all of them getting some form of payoff. Like the air freshener thing he uses as a weapon. Like they go
Yeah.
get those slushies at the end of the episode from Buddies. You have the thing like him realizing while watching the movie what he needs to do and how his plan's going to come to the fruition. Like all of these things that are set up that just have like the kid from the beginning who's like trying to lift the wheels. Like you think, oh, we just get Victor from this, but like no, he comes back later on in the episode to then prove further character points with the Penguin. Like it's all just such good stuff.
Yeah, it's
um
great writing. And before we sort of hold our thoughts there and talk about, what's next for season one, because we started to kind of allude to that at the end there, I wanted to flag too the jewelry store that he pulls up under as like that sequence is about to begin that we started off talking about. It says
mhm.
like the Burgess jewelry store, which is of course a reference to the original Penguin actor from the
Yes,
1960s, which was a cool Easter egg. I'm sure there were many more that I had
I was
missed.
trying so hard to spot all of them. I was like looking at every single sign as it popped up. I'm like, which one is this?
Anyone you
Like,
want to
what?
flag that I
Not that I
didn't get?
noticed,
Okay.
honestly. Like I noticed that one, but yeah, I couldn't.
We'll be on Easter egg watch
Yeah.
for sure. All right, cool. So we're going to take a quick break, but when we get back, we're going to discuss more about the Penguin season one and speculate what's to come. We'll be right back.
Hey, Aspect listener, I'm Robbie.
And I'm Alex, enjoying the show here on the Aspect Network.
Then check out Framing the Force.
We are your one-stop shop for all things in a galaxy far, far away. Each week, we discuss everything from the latest news and releases to the hottest topics in the fandom.
Beyond the films and series, we share our thoughts on every corner of the Star Wars universe, from comics to video games to collectibles and everything in between.
Join us every week as we discuss one of the greatest franchises in film history here on the Aspect Network.
Now, back to the show.
Welcome back to the Aspect Reacts. Before the break, we discussed some of our favorite moments from the pilot episode of The Penguin. Now, we have to wait 10 days before we know what happens next, but it doesn't mean that we can't speculate in the meantime. So, Alex, we talked a little bit about it right before we took our break, but where do you think the show goes from here?
Yeah, I mean, just full on gang war essentially in Gotham. It looks like it's going to be a series of just escalations from here on out, with Penguin seeing how he can game both sides and kind of get maximum power for himself. That's just like it seems to be the thesis statement of the show, is like Penguin getting to be this kingpin, this the criminal, not necessarily mastermind, but yeah, kingpin of Gotham that like he's known as in a lot of, and you see that like in him already being established in a lot of the adaptations and things that we see. And of course, as he is in the comics now, like has been at that level for a long time. And so this is all about him getting there. And so yeah, I think it'll be just a ton of loss and death on both sides. And then also, from what we can tell, and we mentioned it a little bit before the break, but a lot of exploration of the past and like kind of how a couple of the key characters got to where they're at, and going through some of their most like important moments and kind of understanding them on that level, which I think is super interesting. And then again, also being focused on the flood of Gotham and kind of like where people were specifically during that, and kind of how things unfolded there from various points of view, which I think is super interesting. I don't know exactly how I feel about it, but I do. I like that the flooding of Gotham is being treated with the level of like, hey, this is a really huge event that happened. Like, we're going to deal with that and not just immediately move on from it. So I think that that's pretty cool. I do like, I get practically. I also, to be honest, don't really know that much logistically about like how things are when an entire city floods at the level that Gotham is. So like, because my initial thing, I was gonna be like, oh, it looks like pretty good for a city that had like, I saw how much water there was in the Batman, like, like, but I know like logistically you can't, like, you're not gonna be walking around like flooded sets, and so like. But also then I thought about it for another second and like I don't know how a city like that like looks after an event like that. But regardless of that, I do think that it is important and really cool to see that they are treating that event with that level of like impact and how that's going to progress the story moving forward. I'm so curious about that kind of larger thing, like the larger state of Gotham as we move through the series and also the end of the series. Because I saw this one post that was super vague, and I can't remember exactly what they were referencing, but they were referencing they're like Reeves clearly has an affinity for a couple of specific stories that are like very much being set up with this show, and I'm like dying to know exactly what they meant with that, because there's a couple different directions I think that he's going, um, that could play out, and I'm really curious to see which of those it ends up being. um, but yeah, those
Yeah,
are, I
I
think,
mean,
my main
thanks for
Carnage.
covering all of the possible discussion points.
I
Um,
got you.
no, I mean, I think that there's a few things here. I mean, starting with the flood and just kind of where that goes, I think that that will be probably a pretty backseat element of this season, even though it's going to be very prevalent. Because I think Reeves is going to really want to play with the repercussions of that in the sequel, right? Like, there's
Yeah.
been some speculation that obviously, the first Batman ended after like what November 6th, 7th was like the last day of the flood because it was
Hmm.
a week from Halloween, and then this picks up like a week after, and so you know there was already some talk that the show is going to end kind of heading into winter, and people have speculated that maybe that means Mr. Freeze with the flood and everything going on, the Batman sequel.
Please, I
um
wanted so
so that
bad.
would be very cool. Of course, some of the things that are more Penguin specific that I am really excited to see more of, honestly, are like the relationship with his mother, which obviously was set up really well in this first episode. We've already seen that we're going to be getting some flashbacks to him as a child. I'm really interested in what happened to his brothers, because that
Yeah,
seems like
that's a
something
big.
that is going on. Either like some, obviously they're playing with a lot of like, again, like Sopranos story, and then even things like Kingpin from Daredevil and what they did with that character. Like, I see a lot of that influence here. And of course, all of these are just sort of more traditional mob tropes and mob stories. And it'll be very interesting to see kind of where the show goes with that. This is a silly request. I'd like to see the twins back from the Batman movie. I
Those
don't
are
know where they went,
those
um,
guys are sick.
but that would be cool because like that's sort
Tweedledee and
of
Tweedledum.
they're like primary Penguin goons, right? Like they're like his
Yeah,
goons.
yeah.
So let's bring those guys back for something this season. But yeah, I mean, I think continuing to see the crime war is going to be incredibly interesting, and seeing how that all falls out. I mean, sort of my overarching question for you is, again, as sort of the resident Batman expert, is like, one, are there other crime families that you think Reeves in this universe are going to start bringing into the fold as a result of this, as they're clawing for power? And B, like, do you actually expect Penguin to be sort of the kingpin of Gotham crime by the end of this, or is that something that's going to continue to happen as we progress through like the Batman 2 and probably, the trilogy?
So the families thing, probably yes. I'm not sure who though. I'm gonna be honest.
Okay.
My first instinct was to, and they're not necessarily a crime family, but like I would like to have the Powers family mentioned, just because they're a pretty bigger name for a couple of reasons. But then I also could. So then it also depends. Like it's so hard for this to not veer like straight into Batman Part Two stuff for like the larger world building, because then I'm like, oh, it'd be cool to see, depending on the families that are involved, they could be references to like the Court of Owl's existence, which there's
Yeah,
a lot of
I was
like,
gonna ask about that.
yeah, like there's a lot of like there's a lot of speculation so like we might get a couple of things that might hint at like, hey, there's more stuff happening kind of underneath here as far as like power levels in Gotham. Um, so that could be interesting. I do. Besides that, though, I think the main family stuff is definitely like the Maronis and Falcone. But as far as like whether or not Penguin will get to that kind of like kingpin level status and crime boss running Gotham that he's known for by the end of the season, I hope that we see it by at the end. Not necessarily because like I don't think it would be rushed at that point. Like at that point, we have 8 hours plus his time in the Batman. And then my main thing with that is that yeah, you could have it be this thing that plays out longer through Batman Part 2 and then like as the trilogy goes on and whatever else we might get. Um but my main thing is that I would rather him get to that point and then we get more focus on some of the other things that aren't necessarily like or haven't been highlighted as much in the Batman mythos. And so like that's less of a thing of like I don't want to see more of Penguin, but more of I want to see more of the other stuff. And so like it'd be nice, I think, to kind of get him to that level and be like, okay, we've done like he's at this point now. And that's not to say you still can't have any progression from there. But I think it'd be cool because like one of the main points of emphasis that they made was that they wanted to show the journey of him becoming the character that everyone's like
Sure.
recognized as. And I would like to get to that recognized point, like the version that we normally recognize, and then still have a decent amount of time with him after that point, because like I don't want him to like it's like the trope of like why are we giving the superheroes their like iconic costumes in the final 15 minutes of the movie.
Sure.
Like what are we doing there? And so that's why I kind of hope that he does get there by the end of the first season. Do you think he'll get there at the end?
Well, now that you said that, I guess like I honestly wasn't sure, just
It
because
kind
of
of
the
doesn't
nature.
feel like it's paced like that. Like it
And it,
doesn't
it
seem
and
like
it feels a little bit like he's gonna sort of end this with egg on his face, but maybe not. And I think it would be very cool. Like as you were sort of explaining that was their aspirations and sort of goals with this. Like I'm like, okay, I see what you're setting up, and let's keep doing that then. And sort of the sequence of events that was happening in my head was like, okay, if he becomes the kingpin of Gotham by the end of this show and he's sort of just existing throughout the Batman 2, like there's no confirmation that he's going to be back for that either. And I'm sure he'll have some role to play just because of how much Reeves wants to play with the crime families in his universe. And I feel like whatever the threat is going to be in the Batman 2, like Penguin is going to be like, for lack of a better term, like too small of a threat for Batman to really be dealing with. And
yeah.
it's going to allow the crime families to run rampant and continue their sort of reign of power. And I wonder if there'll be conversation that sort of relates to in Batman's, inner monologue of like, there's too many threats going on. Like now I've let the streets run rampant because I have like a guy with a freeze gun running around,
Optimally,
like
that would
dealing
be
with that. But I wonder then if like Reeves does something that more comic book movies should be doing, is like we open up the Batman 3 with like the Scarecrow scene from The Dark Knight, where like the first 15 minutes of the movie is like the Penguin back in
escaping
full
one on
force,
something.
and like the Batman just sort of catching him as sort of like a kickoff point for the third film or something, where it's like, okay, he's been out of the picture for a little while. We need to show that the Batman is like kicking ass still. Let's just like have him go get the Penguin and like a pretty cool opening sequence there. That I don't know. Obviously Reeves isn't thinking that far ahead, but I
I'm
would
sure
like
he
to
is a
see
little
something
bit.
like, I mean, probably a little bit, but I'd love to see something like that where it's like, give me a short sequence of like a well-known villain and like let them go off. But like there's no way that the Penguin is going to be one of like the main villains of the next
2
two
or 3.
films. Also,
Yeah.
like, not again, we're not doing this right now, but like the Joker's gonna come around at some point. We got to deal with that. Like that's a thing. Also, like we the Riddler's probably coming back. We've got like a Sinister Six thing going on with the Batman Rogues. Like, there's a lot going on here. So, we have a lot to discuss over the next 8 weeks or so and beyond. And Alex, I'm going to let you sort of wrap us up here so that we don't go off the rails.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the comparison you made with the Scarecrow and the Dark Knight is perfect because that's exactly like one. I saw someone point this out the other day that it's a super underappreciated aspect of those movies, but the fact that they have a villain, like a comic book villain in a recurring role, like across multiple movies, we don't. It's absolutely bonkers that we don't get that more. Like we have 50 Marvel movies and we don't have that more. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous. But so like I do think that I would love for Penguin to take on that kind of scarecrow in that trilogy role, but like obviously in a more like developed in a larger extent than we see there. So yeah, I would agree with you. I think that he'll show. I know he's not confirmed. I feel like he'll at least show up in part two. But we'll see. You made a good point earlier about the fact that like no one really is confirmed except for Pattinson because there's no movie without
And
him.
probably Circus and Jeffrey Wright. But outside
Yeah,
of that,
like
yeah.
those are the three that are pretty much like pretty solid locks. But yeah, honestly, I'm not super convinced we get Catwoman for part two.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
If we're like being real, I don't think that she shows up. Honestly, I
We
don't
got a
think
lot
that
to talk
there's.
about.
I don't think there's space. But yeah, I think it'd be cool to see him in that role for 2 and 3. But we'll have to see how his story shakes out as we go through the rest of the season. So we'll have a lot to talk about there. But I think that will just about do it for this first week. So thank you everyone for tuning in to episode 1 of The Aspect Reacts to The Penguin. Sean, where can people find you online?
Nice and easy. You can find me online at The Real Sean Hussey.
Awesome. And you can find me online at the Alex Batts, it's Batts, on both Twitter and Instagram. Please be sure to subscribe here to The Aspect on YouTube and any platform where podcasts can be found. Follow us on Twitter/X, Instagram, and TikTok at The Aspect Co. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.